Unicorn Overlord is the new strategy RPG from Vanillaware. I think the game is fantastic, and the opening hours do a great job of introducing the various mechanics that you will experience during your time as the leader of the Liberation Army. I played for around 20 hours, and in this video, I have 5 tips that should be helpful to you as you play. There will be no story spoilers, but there will be minor spoilers as it relates to different units and combat scenarios. Let's dive in. To kick things off, let's talk about the importance of expanding units rather than adding new units. As you progress through the campaign, you're going to notice that after completing different missions and side objectives that you're granted a number of honor points and renown. Those honor points are going to be used to hire new mercenaries, add new units, and expand existing units. As you earn renown, your rank is going to increase, and this will allow you to expand your different units. Rank D will allow you to increase unit sizes by 3, C is by 4, B, for whatever reason, gets skipped, and A is going to allow you to increase unit sizes to 5. You're going to be tempted early on to add different units because of the different character classes that you'll recruit in the opening hours, and you are going to be recruiting so many new characters that your head is going to spin. Pretty much every side objective introduces somebody new. Instead of using your honor points to add units, optimize your existing teams and expand. In the first 6 hours of the game, I only had 5 units total, but each of these had 3 characters, and they were very effective in combat. Once I began to progress to different areas, I added and expanded, but I did that because I noticed that the game was starting to scale in difficulty, and objectives were starting to become more complex. It is recommended that as you add different units, you expand them to at least the maximum size available, because it will allow you to be as effective as possible. Next up, let's talk about being adaptable in regard to unit lineups. Once you get into a groove in Unicorn Overlord, and I predict that most people will be in a groove fairly early on, you're going to be speed running through the game. Different combat scenarios and objectives just aren't going to challenge you, and the primary reason for that is because of Joseph. Joseph is level 20, and he's an absolute monster. And I believe that the game does this intentionally to lull you into a false sense of security, and you're going to wonder, at what point does the game really challenge you, and is it going to happen anytime soon, especially when you get past that first major act? And I'm here to tell you that it does. You may have thought that you have found or created the perfect lineup, but the game is going to introduce new classes as soon as you start rolling into different areas, and these are going to absolutely wreck your teams if you do not adapt. My recommendation is that you do not get attached to a certain lineup, because what works in the first major area may not work in other places. While you're going to want to maintain that diversity in regard to unit traversal, having cavalry units, aerial units, that sort of thing, the game is going to throw you in different combat scenarios where certain characters, like Joseph, may not survive the first wave of enemies. Make sure you're open to adjusting lineups as often as possible to ensure maximum effectiveness and to ensure that you survive some of the more difficult challenges that lie ahead in Unicorn Overlord. Moving on, let's talk about the importance of Valor Skills. At the start, a lane probably has the most useful Valor skill because it buffs both damage and defense for the first encounter. It has a wide radius, meaning you can include multiple parties. Here's the thing. It costs 3 Valor points, and for some that can be a bit too expensive because you're going to want to use the Valor points to deploy more units. And I totally understand that, but by the time you reach that final objective, I recommend popping that Valor skill because you will absolutely need it to destroy some of these garrison bosses at the end. Now, what I'll tell you is that as the game scales, you're probably going to want to use the different Valor skills available because they can really save you in a pinch. And the thing is, when you have diverse units, and this is something I'm going to continuously harp on, that means you have diverse Valor skills. And this is going to help you if you happen to get surrounded or you happen to run into an unfavorable enemy type, which will happen quite often. Hero character classes, which you'll recruit later on, will have unique Valor skills, and these are incredibly useful because of their diversity. You earn Valor points by defeating enemies, capturing objectives. You're going to be tempted to use those points to deploy more units. I really recommend using Valor Skills that can help turn the tide. My personal favorite is hiring mercenaries, and I honestly think that this Valor skill is kind of broken because they only cost 1 Valor point, but the moment they spawn on the field, they have 3 stamina hit points, and they're pretty much just there engaging the enemy and kind of bouncing off of them, and some of them can do incredible damage, and I noticed that some of these mercenaries can kill boss types for you, which is super entertaining and also very shocking, and I don't think Vanillaware intended that. But it's probably one of the most useful Valor skills in the game. I also like any Valor skill that does a wide range in terms of its attack, because you can do a ton of damage, and also there are some that will get you to the opposite side of the field pretty quickly, which is awesome. Valor skills will save you, and I recommend you use them often, especially in these really large scale battles. The next tip is going to be around stacking units for support. You're introduced to this mechanic early on, and it's something that you shouldn't get away from as you progress through the game. You're going to be tempted to send aerial units out to take out towers and weapon emplacements, and this is primarily done to limit the damage done to your ground teams, but I recommend doing this with caution and in pairs if possible. Not only do aerial units have low stamina, but if they're by themselves without support, they can get wiped pretty quickly. Always scout ahead to ensure that sending a unit by themselves is viable, and be wary of areas with poor visibility. There are usually enemy units in hiding, and this can be really frustrating to deal with when objectives start to become more complex. Having your units stack while attacking is great, because when you're dealing with these enemies that have a clear advantage, archers and mages will provide support, which will boost damage if you have units stacked near one another. This allows you to select the unit that will be the most effective in a pinch. It really does save you, and it's something that I constantly use all the time. Now, you do need to keep in mind, if you want to boost your attack with archers or mages, that does cost stamina for those units. It's always tempting to use that support as much as possible because the sheer amount of damage you can do is just enticing. But if you know you can beat those enemies you have a clear advantage over, just fight them straight up. Don't waste your resources. Always stack, because it's going to help you in these longer fights. So the last tip I'm going to provide will contain a minor spoiler, not story-wise, but stuff you find in the overworld. Eventually, you're going to find these areas, and they're going to unlock what's called Sigil Trials. And these are pretty much just challenge dungeons that are fantastic for leveling up your characters. The rewards for first completing these trials are great because you're granted a unique item and a number of experience tomes that help with leveling. If you haven't noticed, leveling in this game is not complicated, but it can be very difficult if you happen to have a multitude of different units. Not every objective you face in this game is going to be complex, and sometimes the first 3 units you deploy will more than likely complete these objectives within under 30 seconds. It does happen a lot, and it does mean that once you reach the larger missions, you'll have a number of different units who might be underleveled. The answer to this problem is the Sigil Trials. These can be found by exploring the overworld, and once you find them, I recommend you grind those out because you are just going to get good experience, and then you can run them with all different types of lineups. The first one that I found was a moderate one, and I had access to all the different field weapons, trebuchets, ballistas, all that stuff. And these are great for eliminating a number of different towers and enemies. The trebuchet can really kill enemies in one shot, and ballistas are just like constant rates of fire, so they just can wipe enemies fairly quickly. I think that the field weapons are pretty overpowered when you get them, but these Sigil Trials are fantastic for level grinding. So if you happen to get frustrated because, let's say, Joseph unit's unbalanced early on, and you're wondering what's going to happen when you get into combat, especially when you get into these really complex scenarios, when you find the Sigil Trials, grind those, and you'll be just fine. And that is going to do it for this video. If you happen to like the content, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. If you happen to have your own tips that you want to leave for Unicorn Overlord, go and do so in the comments section. I really found that these tips are basic, but they're really useful. And it's kind of just one of those more, don't be complacent about these types of things. I know that at the start of the game, I really just wanted to add different units to have this weird lineup. But as soon as I started kind of playing around with it, I found that expanding the units was kind of more valuable because I could create all these different lineups and I had a really great time with it. Unicorn Overlord is fantastic. It's one of my favorite games of the year, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be an underrated gem. But for those of you who do happen to see this video, I'm hoping you're enjoying your time with the game. I'm Ken from Pixelated Thoughts, and I'll talk to you next time.